Um, we're going to continue to talk about how chefs can drive food systems change in our next conversation. With Chef Christine Haw, the winner of MasterChef Season 3, an author and the owner of the Blind Goat and Stuffed Belly in Houston, Texas. Please give her a round of applause as she joins me on stage. Hi, Chef Haw, how are you? I'm so glad to meet you.
Okay, is it handheld? Yes. Okay, thank you.
I'm so glad you're here. Please give her another round of applause.
Hello, everyone.
How wonderful to meet you. How wonderful to have you here at Sundance during our little summit here. You have such an interesting story. You were not trained formally in the culinary world. You became a chef because you did it on your own.
Yes, I actually fell into it. So a little backstory about myself and cooking. Both of my parents were Vietnamese refugees that escaped Saigon a couple days before the fall of Saigon. And I was born in LA, grew up in Houston, and lived most of my life in Texas. And I got to eat my mom's home-cooked Vietnamese food quite a bit as a child. But I lost her when I was 14, and I had never learned to cook from her. So it wasn't until I was older in college that I decided I really missed the home cooking I used to eat growing up. And so I just sort of tried to reverse engineer by memory my mom's recipes and just started experimenting in the kitchen and teaching myself. And at the same time, I began losing my vision. So it was about teaching myself to cook over and over with less and less sight.
Yeah, and to memorize those things in a different way than you would as a formally trained chef, right?
Yes.
And the senses that you had to use, can you talk about that? Because you had to use all of your other senses to really make this happen.
Sure. I always tell people that yes, sight is important, but you don't need it to do things like cooking.
Right.
It is a very multi-sensory experience to cook. So if you close your eyes, and I encourage people to do this quite a bit, to feel your food, to smell what the aromatics smell like in your saute pan, to listen to the sizzle of the pan, to taste your food, and eventually you're able to do the same things you were able to do even when you had sight versus without sight.
It's like Chef Pierre said, like eating with your food is a very visceral, eating with your hands, your food is a very visceral experience that you don't get if you don't touch, if you're only using a fork or a spoon. It's like a very different way of eating. The heritage part of this is obviously so important to you, maintaining your own culture. How have you been able to spread that?
I think it's really just sharing my story, whether it's online, through the media, through my restaurant, The Blind Goats, the modern Vietnamese eatery that I first opened in 2019, and we're still open in Houston, Texas. And currently I'm working on a documentary project. This is my first time to Sundance, so I'm here with my documentary team, and we're trying to just raise awareness about the project and find people to help us finish the film. And that's really just sharing my story and what it means to be Vietnamese American and also cooking as a visually impaired chef.
Yeah, I'm interested in how the eaters who go to your restaurants, how they respond to the story.
Oh, I mean, a lot of people watched MasterChef, but I think a lot of people have transcended beyond that show. I mean, the season I was on was season 3 in 2012, so it was quite a while ago. And I remember after that, I was thinking, I don't know how long this will last, but I was able to open the restaurant and people come and they're just really, really excited to try the flavors that I cooked on the show. And then they learn more about my story and how it transcends just being on MasterChef. So people are very excited to come and try the food.
Yeah. Can you talk about the chefs, the cooks who work in your restaurant, the back of house folks?
Yeah, they're great. They really love just being around me, and I think they like a lot of guests that come in, find my story inspiring, and I think that really is my gift. It's not, winning MasterChef is great, but now I've been given this platform to really inspire and encourage people to pursue the things they love and their dreams in spite of whatever challenges they encounter. So a lot of the back of house, they come to just learn not only modern Vietnamese food, but to meet me and to learn what it means to work around someone who's visually impaired. So everyone on my team from both the front and the back of house really know how to deal with someone who's visually impaired and very audible and, give giving verbal cues, which you
Right,
should be
right.
doing in a kitchen anyway.
Exactly. So you previously had, past MasterChef, you had your own cooking show called Four Senses, and it aired on Accessible Media Inc. or AMI. And almost a decade ago, you said that you love AMI and what it stands for, but it shouldn't just be the sole responsibility of one network to bring inclusive entertainment to everyone. And that's such a valuable message, especially here at Sundance. Can you talk more about it?
Yes, I think I always talk about how disability is something that will affect all of us at some point. We're all getting older. We have parents, grandparents, friends, even children that may experience disability. So for me, I feel like it's really our responsibility to make the world, including entertainment and food, to continue to be more inclusive and universal for everyone to enjoy. So at some point, it is important for all of us to think about that.
It really is. And I'm glad you mentioned elders. I don't think we consider the elders in all of our communities enough, and the challenges they will face cooking their own food as they become less mobile. And that's really important. They'll have to use different senses as well and different ways of getting around their kitchens. You're currently working on your second cookbook and your first documentary film, and I'm wondering how these different media help you tell your stories in different ways.
Yeah, I was actually in my undergraduate, I was a business degree, and when I started dealing with the vision loss, I decided to overhaul my career. And after dealing with losing my vision and being diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, I decided to go back to school for creative writing. So for me, I realized cooking has always been a hobby, and I realized that the correlation or the relationship between food and words is really storytelling. Life is really all about storytelling, whether it's your restaurant, your cookbook, your memoir, your film. So I think to tell your story is what makes us all relatable as human beings. Even if we come from completely different countries or cultures, it's the stories we tell that allow us to understand the human condition and how we're much more alike than we're different.
Exactly, and it allows us to share these different flavors and the deliciousness that is all over. And that's what I love. I wonder what your advice is to both young chefs and documentary filmmakers who are here.
I think that it's really about putting yourself out there, being vulnerable, allowing yourself to have that courage to share your story and not be afraid, because your story is your unique story, but other people will be able to relate to that. Definitely be vulnerable and share your story, because someone else will have related to that story, and that's very, very beneficial in this day and age.
This idea of being vulnerable, that's something that you were sort of forced into doing, but it's also something we can all choose to do. Again, advice on how to make ourselves feel a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more open to others, especially with what we're facing in the world right now, whether it's a climate crisis or a public health crisis.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you an interesting story. When I first began losing my vision, I was actually very ashamed of it. So I would hide the fact that I had to use a cane, and I was on campus, and I would not use my cane and end up stumbling into the wrong restroom. So that's why I'm a proponent of all gender restrooms these days.
Me too.
But suddenly then I was on the show on MasterChef, and all of America, if not the world, knew I was visually impaired, and I couldn't hide anymore. So in some ways, I realized that just ripping it off like a Band-Aid and putting myself out there was very, very liberating. So I think it's always the first step that's the scariest. But when you take that step, you realize that other people relate and very, very supportive. The community is very supportive, and people will find you and find your story inspiring. So I think, don't have so much self-doubt about your project or your work or yourself, and just put yourself out there, and you will realize that the more people that start to relate to you and talk to you about your story and find it inspiring, that will build confidence and allow you to take the next step and keep building on that confidence.
Yeah, definitely. I know it was 2012, it's a while ago now, but can you talk about the response that you were getting during MasterChef and what it meant to you?
It was very strange because I don't like attention, honestly. And I remember as the show started airing, people would follow myself and my husband around the grocery store and be very judgmental about what's in our cart.
No.
Or I would be at the airport and they'd be like, why are you eating that? Don't you cook your own food? And I'm like, I'm traveling and, these pretzels are good.
Right.
So it was a very interesting experience, and it took me some time, but maybe over a year to 2 years, and then I learned to just be more confident about myself and get over imposter syndrome eventually, and just be like, this is me, take it or leave it.
I love it. Chef Ha, because I'm a food person, I'm not as famous as you, but I am scared at the airport all the time that someone will find me eating junk food, so I can relate completely. Can you give us a little bit of a preview of what audience will see in the documentary?
Well, really, my producer, my directors are back there, but it's really them telling the story of their, just my life story. And I think the struggles that I went to a lot of people have found relatable, about losing my mom when I was young, losing my father 3 years ago, the relationship I had with my parents, and just that if any of you had immigrant parents, you may know what that was like. Like, they expected me to be a doctor, not a creative arts major.
Right.
Losing my vision, and just all of that complexity and how that's shaped me into the person I am today.
Oh, that's wonderful. I've been asking everyone who's been speaking today for a call to action, because we're experiencing a lot right now, good and bad. But do you have a call to action to this Sundance audience, this audience of creators?
Yes, I say use your voice, support local independent restaurants, and support independent films and arts.
Thank you so much, Chef. What a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, everyone.
Bigger round of applause. You're amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.